Alright, everybody. Hello. How are you doing, guys? And today we're going to be talking about the potential for a significant severe weather event on Friday, and the potential for severe weather all as well on Thursday. Here we have the Day 2 convective outlook pulled up from the SBC site, and we are looking at a slight risk across portions of southern Kansas, although I think this will probably get extended back north, probably something like this. Western Oklahoma and into the Panhandle of Oklahoma, Panhandle of Texas region. The main threat is going to be large hail, or I guess the SPC doesn't think it's large hail, but in my opinion, it's probably large hail. Damaging winds are also going to be a threat, and a tornado or two as well can't be ruled out. This was a 5% tornado risk, but that has gotten taken out since the models have backtrended. And we just had a special Day 3 outlook issued across portions of the Ozarks and Arklatex region to add an enhanced risk. This includes central into northeast Texas, extreme northwest Louisiana, southwest Arkansas, and southeast Oklahoma. Extending more northward, we have a marginal risk in extreme western Illinois, most of Missouri, eastern Kansas, a good portion of northern and west central Oklahoma, central Texas, and western Mississippi, eastern Louisiana, and like eastern Arkansas. Along with that, we have a slight risk of severe weather across central and western Arkansas, a good portion of Oklahoma, a good portion of Texas, and then western Louisiana. So looking into the SPC's discussion here, the main threats are going to be, the main threat is going to be a damaging wind gust, which is why this was added, although there is a conditional risk for significant tornadoes as well. So something to kind of keep an eye on, based off the SPC discussion at least. Here we go. Here's a look at the HRRR for tomorrow. We'll kind of go through the reflectivity first and then kind of stop it here. We're expecting storm initiation to happen right around 6Z or so right now. And the potential for some elevated supercells behind the cold front here. Looking into forecasting profiles here, we can see photographs are going to be favorable for this. Thermodynamic profile is pretty meh, so we're really going to be looking at just hail and wind. If anything can get going along the front, there may be a tornado chance as well. No, so it looks like we're just going to have a chance for some wind and hail, mainly with this day now. If storms would have fired earlier, maybe we could have seen something else. Here is Friday morning. We can see there's going to be a chance for some tornadoes across Oklahoma and into Kansas on Friday morning. And up into the Kansas City area as well. We're going to have to keep an eye out for some tornado potential. It's a low end up here, but it's something to keep a mind of. Now, once we get towards hour 48, I'm not really going to be diving as much into Thursday. I'm going to be more diving into Friday. We can see the HRRR projects this nasty trough. I would say it's more neutral tilted, I feel like. I'm not the best with tilts, so if I did this wrong, tell me in the comments. But to me, this looks a little bit more neutral tilted, which definitely still favors severe weather. We can see our vectors are more east-northeastward, which would probably favor a linear mode, although the HRRR lags the cold front, so we can look at the cold front here. It lags it back. We'll make the cold front here this blue line. Really, it's this blue line right here. And then we have storm initiation that actually occurs further to the west of that blue line. Now, this might work a little bit better with EpicPen because EpicPen doesn't crash when my screen crashes, which is annoying. So pink line here, this is going to be our cold front. That's generally where your cold front is and is kind of set up. And then we can see here we have our supercells that are forming out ahead and on it looks like a couple confluence bands. We also have to watch out for the cold front here up and through Oklahoma and Kansas and Missouri for some storm potential as well. But as we can see here, there's a little, looks like there's some sort of boundary, maybe a confluence band, maybe a thermal boundary, but it's definitely some sort of boundary which is enhancing the severe potential in this general area. We can see, really in here, you can see there's a big kind of, I don't know, difference in dew points. We have low 70s out here, mid 60s over here. Maybe it's a small dry line of some sort. Looks like the dry line though is further back to the east, with the cold front being all the way back in more West Texas there. So looks like this is gonna be initiated off prefrontal boundaries, and since it's also adrenaline, that'll also enhance stuff. Looking into our general convective ingredients, there's an abundance of 3 cape available for the Squall line and also for the Supercell threat. We have 100 plus joules per kilogram shaded kind of within this area generally. And this will only rise. Mixed layer cape is also quite high at 1,500 plus joules per kilogram. If we take a look at our HODO map and our instability map, we can see there's really favorable hodographs in lots of spots. Not so much here, which is probably where the boundary exists, but here looks good. Here's good. This is good. Anywhere with check marks, in my opinion, is a good hodograph for tornadic development. Even down to the coast, it's going to look like that too. If we take a sounding within the better hodograph area, kind of where your supercells are developing, up through Oklahoma here, we can see it's a very solid forecast sounding. We have an EML that is eroded at this point in between 500 and 750 millibar. We can see our hodograph is starting to become enlarged. We have 3 cape upwards of 60 joules per kilogram, which for an averaged box sounding like this is pretty solid, especially when your 3 kilometer has a decent amount of instability like that. We also have solid deep layer shear upwards to 50 to 60 knots, which we can calculate from using our 0 kilometer dot to our 6 kilometer dot, and that's approximately 55 knots or so. We can also say our lapse rates are favorable for more rapid storm growth, especially into the mid levels, but your low levels aren't exactly terrible either. Hodograph supports tornadic development, wind development, and hail development, although the thermodynamic profile is going to support more wind and tornado development more than anything. We do take a point sounding here in North Central Texas. We can see that the hodographs are really solid up here. The only thing is this veer back veer, which might get corrected as we get a little bit further out here. But yeah, we're looking pretty solid here. And I think the HRRR is one of the higher end scenarios for the event. It already has a very solid parameter space, better than the NAM. And we're only out to 18Z with it. The wrap is also just loaded in, but we're not going to look at that for now. We're going to go back and look at the NSSL. I don't know what this thing is just glitched. I don't know what it's doing. Okay, why don't we go look at the FE3 then, since that screen is just being stupid. So the FE3 does develop a supercell here in kind of west central Oklahoma tomorrow evening. The environment is not so great. The past couple runs were a lot better than this. Your hodograph is very favorable, but if you look at your thermodynamic profile, we have a couple inversions here. We have a stable layer throughout the whole profile. This is just not going to favor tornadic development. Maybe some hail and wind, but this might stunt storms in general. The supercell does start to grow once it gets a little bit more into Kansas here. Not too surprising. Your thermals start to get a little better. You can see that cold front really starts to grow, and we start seeing supercells fire 17 to 18 Z is probably the time frame. And let's kind of look at the FE3 solution. And we can see here, you can see stuff starts firing along the front throughout the day, but then it goes boom at 17Z. We start to see that cap erode, and I don't know if we're going to get a full sounding or not. Maybe we'll get a good thermal profile. Okay, so we actually did get a full hodograph and everything on the FE3. We can see at this point, your thermodynamic profile is really starting to get a lot better. It's skinny cable-wise, but the FE3 typically underdoes the instability from what I've seen, so not too surprising. We could see a couple discrete storms initially along the boundary before we go linear. We have a few prefrontal supercells that start developing. If they actually develop south like that, we're in for a pretty big event. That area has a pretty good parameter space on most models. You can see pretty intense UH tracks are developed along with the FB3, and it's got a good environment in front of it, very large hodographs, solid instability, which would favor a pretty significant severe event. And we can see we have Tail and Charlie starting to develop further south too, which is not too surprising. Looking into the NSSL, if we're gonna load. Okay, so there we go. The NSSL is actually now working. we can see here, looking into the NSSL, don't have the most favorable solution out there. Again, for tomorrow, it really doesn't fire anything at all, which is another fail mode that we're starting to see, is that convection not firing. Here we go. Here's the wrap. We're going to take a look at the wrap synoptically a little bit more, as I need to dive into the synoptics a little bit more before really anything. Give it a second to load. I really do like tomorrow for discrete storm development, but the thing is, the moisture arrives a little bit too late, in my opinion, for there to be a more significant severe weather event, because this has the look of significant plains severe weather event any real season, right? I mean, you have 50 to 80, maybe 90 knots of mid-level flow generally across this region into the panhandle back here. Very strong trough with a long wave with an embedded short wave kind of in here. We can see we have we have a high pressure kind of centered out in the southeast United States, which is drawing up moisture throughout the southern plains, which is just perfect, but it's a little bit too late. If we look at the moisture, we only have upper 50s at this point, and our better moisture is sticking south. Now, yes, the environment does get very good at 60, but that's too late, and your vectors become linear at that point, most likely, unless something forms in Kansas in the open warm sector, because really, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas along the front here, your vectors are linear, but as you get further to the northeast, they're a lot better, but I don't know if you're going to really get storms there, because I'm not sure if there's anything to force anything. Looking into forecast soundings, you can see your mixed layer cape values are quite strong, but there's really no surface cape because of an inversion. So storms will be fed off the overnight LOJ, which is 34 knots. You can also see within here we have MU cape of 1,500 joules per kilogram, which also enhances stuff. Your hodograph would definitely favor hail development, given the fact that'd probably be the main mode, along with the wind gust threat. Tornadoes would be pretty irrelevant in the situation because of the surface inversion, which is a very common theme across really the whole warm sector, except maybe Oklahoma, Kansas over here. But if you take a sounding over here, you have really no instability, skinny instability profiles. Now moving on into Friday. Here's Friday. We'll go to like 21Z. That's probably the most favorable time. We can see very little convective inhibition. We can see it's hard to depict storm mode with the wrap, and the wrap also usually underdoes low pressure strength, but that look is just nasty. I mean, straight parallel, we probably have embedded discrete supercells everywhere up and down that line. 70-degree dew points coming up into Oklahoma, upper 60s and 60s all the way into Illinois, Wisconsin, with mid-60s into Missouri. This is just a classic look for severe weather. A large warm sector as well. This trough is nasty, and actually discrete vectors are really appearing across Missouri, Arkansas here, so if anything can get going in front of that, we'd be in for a pretty significant event, which is very possible. Kind of looking into your theta E vectors as well, we have very strong theta E values really anywhere in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, into Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas, definitely favorable into the mixed layer cape values, and we can see that there are 1,000 to 3,000 joules per kilogram down here by Texas. But what sets up this overall threat? Well, we have a 500 millibar trough that is getting a lot of ingredients out of Mexico, and since it's getting a lot of stuff out of Mexico, it's advecting an EML in, and we can see that with our 850 millibar temps. You can see our source region is that area. You're advecting your 850s from that area, which is also going to create an EML, which is going to favor severe weather potential because it's going to kind of create a cap on storms until they can break the cap and become more favorable. And as we can see here, throughout the morning hours, there is a heavy cap unless you're along the cold front in Kansas and Oklahoma, and into Missouri and Texas as well. I think the Kansas and Missouri area is going to be very messy. You're probably going to see a few stronger storms that will try to arise, maybe a tornado or two, but that area looks messy. If we take a sounding across Oklahoma and Texas, we can see it's got that and significant severe weather look in the morning. You have a very strong low-level hodograph. Your mid-levels are starting to get better as that trough ejects in. You have very steep mid-level lapse rates at over 7 Celsius per kilometer between 3 and 6 kilometers. You also have strong 700 to 500 millibars as well. Your instability mixed layer is 400, which isn't terrible, or most unstable, sorry. And mixed layer is actually 400 too, so my bad, I didn't see that at first. But yeah, pretty favorable generally. And then once you get toward 1817Z, we see that cap is gone. That's what happens when you have a stronger system like this. It erodes it very quickly, and we start to see storms initiate. So now let's kind of go into more of the specifics of the event. So here we are. We have 70 dew points all the way up into the Texas area already at 18Z. We can see we have decent parameters. Not the best at 17Z, but, you know, having a hodograph like this at 17Z isn't all terrible. Going toward 20Z, we can see the environment really starts to increase. And we can see these photographs are really, generally, this stripe of photographs in here is quite concerning. If we go on to reflectivity mode, probably the best way to take soundings here, and we'll take a sounding in northeast Texas here. Very favorable sounding for stronger tornadoes. We have a very enlarged low of a hodograph here, along with stronger 3 Cape. Notice between the 0 and 3 kilometers. The only thing is that we have a slight warm nose at 700 millibars, which is going to maybe disrupt the instability a little bit at the low levels. It's also kind of causing the lapse rates to peter out a little bit and not be so good. Here's Oklahoma, which is very solid on the wrap. Would favor a stronger tornado or two as well. Here's eastern Texas. This is probably going to have a lot more instability. Yep, and the hodograph is still good, but not great. Further east in Texas, this is probably the most perfect environment you're going to get. I mean, everything's there for a pretty good severe weather event. Southwest Arkansas as well probably is going to have a good environment, and yep, it does, except that warm nose. So now let's take a box sounding across the warm sector at this point, and we're going to take it all the way up here. So this is going to be a big sounding, and very favorable. We have 3 Cape of 50 joules per kilogram, which for a box that size is very solid. A very elongated hodograph, and pretty large hodograph as well, which is going to favor tornadic and wind development, maybe some hail development as well. It's a little moist, but we'll see. Our lapse rates are decent, not great, especially in the low levels. Your low levels aren't too great, especially between the surface and 3 kilometers, but it'll work. The rest of our lapse rates are 6 to 7. Now, as we get towards 0Z, we're probably going to see our max environment start to kind of creep in here. Probably, what? Northeast Texas is probably going to have our max environment here, right in that whole free. Yep, that's not surprising. We have a very strong low hodograph. I know it's a little bit contaminated here. It's probably going to be very hard to get an uncontaminated sounding. The wrap often overdoes the precip, and it kind of screws with the saturation, and you get so many contaminated soundings. That's not a contaminated sounding, and that's a good hodograph, too. Let's see if we can get a non-contaminated sounding out here in, like, Louisiana as well. Okay, that's a good sounding because you have a very good hodograph here. The only problem is a little bit of a warm nose at 700 millibar, which is a common theme, which could be a limiting factor to disrupt our severe weather setup, which is why we discuss our limiting factors. Another one is maybe the squall runs out of the better instability parameters and goes a little bit too fast. We'll see. Overall, looking at our 850 millibar pattern, I mean, we have a pretty strong low-level jet, 40 plus knots in lots of spots. Let me go look and see how the Missouri environment looks, because that was interesting earlier, and we can look at that right now. And yeah, that's pretty decent actually. There's a spot of no precip there in southwest Missouri. Very large hodograph, not as much instability, but that could work for some tornadic development. Maybe toward 20Z, the environment's decent over there too. And yeah, it is pretty decent. So we could be really looking at a large area of severe weather potential. We have mixed layer Cape all the way up into Iowa. More significant mixed layer Cape, though, is really going to be kind of along the cold front here. I'll take another box sounding there, which is pretty decent. We could see a severe threat up into Iowa here. Looking at a forecast sounding, it looks like our main issues are going to be wind and hail with this, as we have practically zero thermodynamics in the low levels, and it's very saturated. Now here's a look at the NAM 3 kilometer, which is a higher end scenario for the event. As we can see here, we can kind of see how it evolves with tomorrow as well at the same time. And you can see here, it doesn't really fire convection until really early in the morning on Friday. And we get a pretty intense QLCS going in Kansas and Oklahoma there, which is a pretty common theme. Soundings favor wind damage as the main threat. And then once we get toward 20Z or so, we start to see our supercells fire off in the open warm sector there. If we go a little further south, our environment's probably going to be pretty good. And yep, a very good environment there. Here is North Central Texas ahead of the squall line. Pretty solid. We have a lot of 3 Cape there available. Here's Northeast Texas as well, which this is not the best. It's a little bit more capped in the low levels there. This is a good sounding though ahead of the discrete and QLCS mode in Central Texas. We have a large hodograph here, which would favor tornadic and hail development again. We actually have a decent hail growth layer here, so large hail would be a possibility. Because we also have steeper lapse rates. We have a bit better dry air in the middle levels, and it's not super moist to where you would still get a hail threat. PWatts are not nearly 2. At some places they are. You can see the squall line really starts to get going though overnight. We can see this is going to probably create some issues into Dixie Alley, although the exact threat of Dixie Alley is kind of uncertain. Here's a box sending though across pretty much all of eastern Texas, and this is let me make it a little smaller so we don't get as much precip. This is a very concerning look when you have a box sending that looks like this and covers pretty much all of eastern Texas there. Very, very large hodograph. Very good for really tornado development in line segments and supercells. The line segments are going to be more dependent on the 0 to 3 kilometer vector. Which the 0 to 3 kilometer vector is 700 millibars. You can also see the thermodynamic profile, not the best 3 Cape, but that is a larger area, so you got to make that a thing. If we take a sounding kind of out in front of the line in a smaller area there, we can see the 3 Cape is very, very high. So that's something to note. And we'll stop it at 54 because I also want to take a look at our 700 millibar wind and see what our vectors are like. And our vectors are, yeah, they're pretty perpendicular with the line, I would say. They're going at a 90-degree angle, I think. The line's moving kind of this way or so. So I think we would probably see a pretty significant tornado threat because of the way the vectors align with this. Probably Oklahoma would probably be... Oklahoma, Northeast Texas is probably going to be where the max threat is. I also want to show something about Saturday as well, because there could be a pretty big windstorm across the Midwest that we can touch basis on, and maybe some severe weather across Illinois if everything goes correctly in Wisconsin. With the line of storms along the low, maybe we'll get an isolated severe storm with that. There is a small ring of ML Cape that does appear with the newest NAM run, although soundings are not going to favor severe weather. Some isolated severe chance probably will exist along the Gulf Coast somewhere. I would not be surprised to see a severe storm or two. Yeah, maybe Ohio. Let's kind of talk about the winds with this. So looking at the low levels, we're going to have a very strong trough ejects, and this trough is going to go crazy once it ejects across the Midwest. It's going to bomb out. The NAM shows a cyclone of 986 or so millibars developing, which is very strong. We see our 500 millibar winds get a lot stronger too as our system kind of moves. So that is something to note, that our system will get much stronger. Something to note though is that the NAM 3 kilometer is probably overdoing the low levels yet. As we'll see, other models probably won't show this. Late into the night, there probably will still be a severe threat across portions of Louisiana, although that'll be limited. Probably still some wind and maybe a tornado threat. The regular NAM, sorry for bouncing to situations, but the regular NAM is pretty similar to the NAM 3 kilometer. I mean, very strong squall line. You can see it's breaking through the, what's it called? It's breaking through the 500 millibar map. I think everything is similarly placed now, except the NAM is a little bit faster than the HRRR, which is interesting. But yeah, favorable environment for all hazards is going to exist on Friday. I think tornadoes and wind are going to be the main threats. We're probably going to see a threat for a few to several tornadoes on Friday. A couple stronger tornadoes, maybe a longer tracked one if we can get a discrete supercell. And then damaging wind gusts, probably numerous 60 to 70 mile an hour gusts, maybe an isolated stronger one if we can get a little bit more of an inverted V profile, or maybe just because of the strength of your 850 millibar trough that you can get a better wind gust over 6 to 74. But that's going to do it for this one. If you tuned in for the whole thing, thanks for watching. I know this is a bit lengthy, but there was a lot to discuss because this is a very interesting setup for the time of year we're in, with this very strong trough digging in and a lot of moisture. That's going to do it for this one. I may go live for part of Friday. Going to be after school most likely, so probably 4 to 7, maybe a little longer. But I'll tune in the community tab if anything. So I'll see y'all in the next one. Goodbye.